Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
We're sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties, but we are now up and running, and we're excited to kick off this webinar called Rules of Engagement, where we are going to do a deep dive into influencer marketing today. I am Liza Kors. I am the CEO and co-founder of Embello. We are an influencer marketing agency and platform dedicated to the home industry. That's me on the left right there. And then I am with Anne Sage, the uber talented content creator. She is our talent relations strategist.
I am a talented talent relations strategist.
And why don't you start off by introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah. So I have been with Liza and Embello pretty much since the beginning of the company, and the reason I am on board is because I myself have a pretty long history in the online content creation space. I started a blog 12 years ago in 2008, which now of course is the dinosaur days of online content, but it's been a thrill to watch the industry evolve from one where it was just lots of passionate creatives writing blogs because they were looking for a voice, and now we of course have an entire marketing industry that has evolved around this space, and it's been a thrill to be at the forefront of that and to work with brands ranging from KitchenAid to West Elm to Krypton Fabric, you know, anyone and everyone in the home space. That's been my specialty and my passion, and it's, you know, I've really had the opportunity to learn firsthand what works and what doesn't work when it comes to brand partnerships with influencers. And so that's why I'm here with Embello, to make sure that everyone on both sides of the equation is getting their needs met and these collaborations are going smoothly and successfully.
Thanks, Anne. So a little bit about me. I actually started my career working at IHA as one of the sales managers. I managed the Discover Design category, which is the high design category there, and also all of the international pavilions at the show. So I am very familiar with the show and the industry and many of the brands that are member companies and also exhibitors. I moved to the West Coast, where we are now in sunny California, and ran a design education conference series for the interior design community. And then I also did marketing for a celebrity interior designer. And that is really when I started recognizing how impactful influencer marketing was to businesses, and how other industries such as fashion and beauty were really being able to capitalize on it. And our home industry always being a little bit slower to adapt, but especially the home furnishings industry. I think Housewares is definitely a little bit more advanced, but you know, really what we're looking to do is to be able to facilitate a lot of the relationships between the brands and the influencers. And what Anne and I do in addition to that is we do a lot of this, a lot of education, because we know that influencer marketing is still really new. There's a lot of unknowns, and when you get into it, it's a lot of work, and so a lot of questions as to how to find influencers, what the process is, contracts, analytics, what type of deliverables should I set, all of those questions. So that's what we're going to do, is dive deep into some of those questions. And this presentation is really based off of a presentation that we both did in September during CHESS, which was the Chief Housewares Executive Super Session, where 150 top executives in the housewares industry got together, and we presented this presentation. But what we did is actually split it up into 3 parts. And so that was more of an overview, and what we really want to do here is dive deep into a little bit more of the strategy, provide you with examples so that you can walk away and incorporate this into your business. So we'll go into the agenda. So what we're going to cover in this first part, there's going to be 3 parts. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. So this is part 1 of 3. And today we'll go over what influencer marketing is, why working with influencers is beneficial, but we'll also get really specific as to the different types of influencers. That's really, really important. We'll go through some key statistics in the industry just to give you an overall sense as to how it's been impacting other companies, but also just the different social platforms and their demographics, so you can really understand what's best for your company. Also providing success stories. We love providing examples, and we'll try to do that as much as possible throughout our presentation as well. And then we'll start with, or we'll end with setting your goals and KPIs, and that will really lead us into part 2, which we'll let you know when that will be, but that will get us started. So going into influencer marketing, what is influencer marketing? So influencer marketing is a type of marketing where instead of you reaching your target customer directly, you are working with influencers and content creators to drive your brand message to your target audience. And so, Anne was one of the original, I think, when it really, there was no structure to it, right?
Yeah, there wasn't structure. I don't think any of us set out to do this because we thought we could make a career of it. We simply had topics we were excited about, and I believe this is across the board, not just in the home space, but fashion, beauty, food, creatives who were looking for a voice, and this new digital opportunity became available to us, and we jumped on it. And at the beginning, especially, a huge part of it was community. So, everyone had their list of fellow bloggers that they would visit every day, and we would all really lift each other up and support each other. And we put the social in social media, and that basis of community and, authenticity and sharing created a foundation wherein the audiences also came for that energy, for that positive, supportive energy, where we were all just really excited about the topics we were discussing. And that's why now we have these audiences that are so engaged, that are so loyal, and that's what, you will get into the value of influencer marketing later, but that's what makes an influencer's audience so powerful, because they've been, in many cases, with these influencers for the long haul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's important to note that, influencer marketing has turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it really has only been around for a little bit over 10 years. And it's the percentage of growth every year over year is incredible. I know that this year 67% of marketers increased their marketing budgets, and so it's definitely an industry that is fast growing. And I think, marketers now more than ever are recognizing the importance of influencer marketing and really value the fact that these influencers have these really engaged and dedicated audiences. And so brands are essentially tapping into these audiences that influencers have spent many, many years building.
Yeah, and I think the key word here really is trust. The trust that's been built over the years between a content creator and her audience is something that is harder for brands to build because they don't have that personal face. And that is what brands can tap into, that trust, when they're doing influencer marketing.
And we'll go into a little bit more about that with, why influencers are so impactful. But wanted to talk about just some of the ways that brands are incorporating influencer marketing, into their strategies.
Yeah, so there's so many different ways to work with influencers, or content creators, as I like to call them, because I've heard influencer, I think in many people's minds, can be a dirty word. So but positioning them as content creators really gets to the meat of what influencers are doing, which is creating imagery, stories, the meat of what lives on social media that audiences engage with. So there's lots of different types of campaigns and programs that can be done. The first one being, and all of them, there's no good, bad, right, wrong. They're all just different depending on what your goals are and of course what your budget is. So for ambassador programs, that might be that you choose to work with perhaps just a few influencers over the course of a longer period of time, and you're creating several campaign touch points with them. I can think of, Lamps Plus recently created an ambassador program where they have very well-known designers visit their warehouse and visit their showroom and their design studio, and there's a longer storytelling that really creates a lot of depth and breadth with audiences. And then of course there's just basic sponsored content, and this is probably the most common type of campaign that everyone is familiar with. It's a one-off or perhaps a two-off engagement with an influencer for an Instagram post or a blog post or a video where, the brand delivers some guidelines for the campaign, but then the influencer puts that messaging into their voice and uses their visual style. Event coverage is another, I think, really fun and exciting way to collaborate, especially if you are looking for a particular geographic niche, and we'll get into that more later too. But simply put, you may contract a few influencers in a local market to attend an event and guarantee some coverage for that event. And the way that's really powerful is, yeah, you can send out a guest list and hope that your guests will be putting it on Instagram or sharing it on stories, but contracting some influencers to do so guarantees a certain degree of coverage for the event. And also you get to have some say over how that coverage is presented. Affiliate links, very simple and straightforward. It can be a great incentive for the creators you're working with to get an additional commission and drive traffic for sales for your product. And then last but not least, simple product reviews. And that's where you're sending product out for review, and that might be on Instagram stories or a blog post.
We've even seen Amazon.
Yeah, we've seen Amazon doing it. What I'll say about that one, especially, is if there's no compensation taking place in addition to the product being sent, you definitely have less say over things like the timing and the messaging, because there's most likely not a contract in place. You're just sending product with the hopes that it will appear in someone's social platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think with the ambassador programs, those are more long-term relationships, right? Where usually the influencer, content creator, is already a customer, a fan, and it's not only just on social, right? Like they might do an appearance, or they might also, I know companies that invite influencers to their warehouse and really get the experience as to how the products are made, so that they can then communicate that to their audience as well. And then even with the event coverage, some companies that we work with have gotten creative on, perhaps it's not necessarily an event, but it's a showroom space. And so having the influencers go into a space, select product, but then incorporate that into their final post as well.
Yeah.
So there's ways to do, I think, multiple of these through a campaign.
Yeah, and it all goes back to your goals, which, like we said, we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah. Okay, so what is an influencer? Anne touched on it a little bit before when talking about trust. But really, when you think about it, many of you perhaps are already following influencers in your own lives. And what I find is so interesting is that people actually choose to follow these influencers. They've actually identified that they like their content, they like what they're saying, they want to be inspired by them. And they, what you mentioned of the word influencer sort of having this kind of bad name, I think some people are getting concerned as to, is it being too saturated? Like, are people, knowing that the influencer is going to have sponsored posts? And I think people know that that is part of the process, that everything that you present, whether it's sponsored or not, is highly curated. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, a lot of the influencers on our end, when we reach out to them for brand collaboration, sometimes it's not a good fit and they actually will reject the campaign. And so it has to really align on both ends. But yeah, I mean, going back to, what an influencer is, I think they're aspirational. It's not forced. It's very organic. You could be going through your feed and seeing your friend post, walking their dog, and then the next post is influencer cooking a recipe and your favorite bakeware, and you're getting inspired, right? It's part of your daily life, and so it doesn't feel forced like an actual ad would.
Yeah, and I think that Liza hit it on the head with these two really important words, which is both aspirational and accessible. And the influencers that you want to work with are the ones who strike that delicate balance. They present a version of life that we can all aspire to, and like this best, most beautiful vision we have for our lives, but also they keep it real and you feel like you know them. And I love personally, on my social platforms, when I see both of those, that accessible, inspirational balance being struck, and someone might, in the same message to me, ask where I got my bedspread, but then also share a story with me about their pets and how, they, like my cats, love a cozy bedspread, right? So it's this blend of, I want what you have, but we're already also on the same level. I think that's a really nice note to strike when you're looking for that level of both trust and also influence. And of course, where does this come into play for you guys as brand managers and marketers? Well, very simply put, influencers have the ability to influence and impact people's purchasing decisions.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so let's dive into the different types of influencers. There are many different tiers and also categories. And again, like Anne mentioned in a different section, there's no right or wrong. It's just what's best for your company, and again, your budget, because that'll definitely be a big factor into what type of influencers you're going to work with. And so we're going to start with mega influencers. So those are influencers that have 1 million and plus followers. They are usually probably more on the famous side than actual, content creators. And so they now are influencers because they've been able to build this large social following, and, people follow them obviously and see what they're doing and seeing, but it might not be as specific or niche to a certain category because their audience is so large. They are going to have a very diverse audience. And so it can be people from, all over the country, maybe not so dedicated on a specific, like Los Angeles or, Chicago, or even interests as well. It could be a variety of home, but also.
Yeah, like here we use a picture of Bobby Burke from Queer Eye as an example of a mega influencer. And absolutely, he's going to have a good chunk of followers who are there for his home decor tips and design passion, but then there's going to be people who are there because they love the show and they love his personality, and then there's people there who really support the message of inclusivity, and then there's people who just follow because they love following celebrities. So what makes working with a mega influencer terrific is just sheer brand awareness. This is like taking out an ad on the Super Bowl. You're maximizing the number of people who are going to be seeing the content that someone like Bobby is sharing. But again, it's going to be quite a broad selection of people.
Mm-hmm. And so moving into the macro level influencer, these influencers are going to fall into the follower range of between 100,000 and 1 million followers. And of course, that's actually a pretty big,
that's a big range.
But, you know, macro influencers are still going to be, depending if you're on the more, you know, on the million side, are still going to be rather expensive. And so you'll still want to determine if these influencers are actually a right fit within your budget. But they can actually get a little bit more focused than a mega influencer. And so these influencers probably are not famous from, you know, being a model or a television star. They actually started creating content and maybe were one of the originals and have built content over many, many years and have gained a really large dedicated following. And so some of these influencers can be more focused. Like here we have an example of Emily Henderson, who she's, you know, very focused in home and styling. I know she has a line with Target. And so obviously focused within the home sector as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, I think we're good with that one. So going into micro, maybe you want to speak to that since that's you.
So micro, I love that now we're calling someone with 100,000 followers micro, but that's the world we're in today. So definitely someone with this range of followers is someone like me who started out creating content, and that really is the core of what they do. So most likely is focused in a specific industry, perhaps brings in other aspects. For example, I think of myself as a home industry influencer, but sometimes I'll talk about entertaining, sometimes I'll talk about wellness, but it's all through the lens of building this beautiful life in my home. One great thing about working with influencers at this level is that trust with a specific niche audience is going to be much more targeted than someone who has, you know, 1 million+ followers. The people who are following me are almost certainly following me for my home decor content. There's certainly an aspect of my voice and personality that appeals to them as well, or they wouldn't be following me. But if I all of a sudden turned around and started posting fashion, I could expect a pretty quick drop off in my following, because these people are there for home. And the level of engagement that I get on home content is reliably very high. So that's, for you guys, you know, a micro influencer is probably going to be a biggest bang for your buck when it comes to working with content creators.
Yeah, I think it's definitely when I'll say, you know, affordable, I mean, it's definitely, some influencers will charge between 15 to 3,000 a post depending on their engagement. But I think that's the biggest point here is influencers at this level are able to engage with their audience much more. You're able to answer their questions. And so that's why the engagement rates for working with more of this tier of influencer, you'll receive a higher engagement as opposed to maybe working with like a mega or macro type influencer.
Yeah. And engagement from the audience you're specifically looking to reach.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, so nano influencer is sort of a newer term, and we kind of put my headshot there as kind of funny, but really nano influencers are going to be everyday people. And so under 5,000 followers, but really what the point is that we all have followers, friends and family that we can influence. And so, for example, I'm originally from Chicago. And so, you know, that could be a demographic. I live in LA. That is also, I'm a crazy cat lady, you know, perhaps that's something as well. So, I mean, there's definitely a type of influencer for every company, I think is the point, in every budget. And there's influencers that are starting off like a nano influencer, or maybe even like that 5,000 follower micro influencer who's still building their brand, that will work with companies on more of that product trade if you're still starting off. And so there's options for any level and any budget that you want to implement for influence marketing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the tiers, which I think is more dedicated to, I guess, the the number of followers
Yeah.
and just the level that they are on that aspect. These are the different types of categories of influencers. And so starting with bloggers. And so bloggers are going to be, you know, creating content. They have their own dedicated blog that they keep up consistently. It's very important for them to build that blog, and the number of unique visitors on that blog is extremely important to them. The reason why working with bloggers can be really beneficial to companies is because they are able to provide links, direct links to your website. So whether they are product links to the specific products that they are talking about, or
key phrases that you
right.
want to build out.
Exactly. And so all of that is really just to improve your SEO. And so, you know, Google rewards companies that have many backlinks to their website, but also keywords. So, you know, a tip you can kind of take away as well is, in addition to providing links and messaging guidelines, you should also know the keywords that you're implementing on your website, and make sure that, you know, send them over to the influencer and see if they can also incorporate those keywords into their blog, so that it really aligns, and it's just improving your SEO and just building up those backlinks as well.
Yeah, and then as we mentioned here, another benefit of working with someone who has a blog that has a dedicated audience is you really can dive deeper into whatever story and messaging you're looking to tell, because, you know, very basically put, a blog post has more images and more text than an Instagram post or a pin on Pinterest. So if there's a larger story that you're hoping to get out there, then working with a blogger is the perfect opportunity to do that.
And I think similar advantages with bloggers is also being able to tell that complete story. And bloggers, you know, focus on creating video content, whether it be YouTube or Vimeo, or I know now IGTV is becoming really, really popular for influencers to create content. And we know that video is becoming extremely popular as a whole, as content, and people consuming that as well. But it's a really great way for companies to be able to really provide product demos. So maybe there's a process that you want to explain, or, you know, I mean, even it could be nice if there's a food blogger that's sort of using your products, or talking about a tablescape, or styling a room, or, I mean, cleaning and organization. I mean, there's so many different topics that can really benefit from actual video content.
Yeah, and I think a great point to remember here with video content is that you don't have to necessarily be contracting the influencer for a complete dedicated episode on their web series. It could be as simple as sending your mixer to a food blogger and contracting them for a certain number of mentions and links to that mixer over the course of several episodes, right? There's so many ways to get creative about what these arrangements look like, and video certainly lends itself to those types of placements.
Okay, so going into celebrities and then social sensations, we've seen celebrities really use social media to their advantage in a lot of different platforms, and you'll see a lot of them have a really large social following. So celebrities are going to be obviously, you know, stars and more recognizable outside of social, but they have the social component with them, which could be really great for companies with really, really large budgets, because celebrities are going to be really, really expensive to work with. I think the highest paid influencer was Kylie Jenner, and it was for $1 million for just one post.
For one post, that sounds about right. And even a lower level celebrity influencer, I remember hearing from someone, Vanessa Hudgens of High School Musical fame, you know, something like $30,000 for a mention on Instagram, which is, my gosh, what you could do with $30,000 and a handful of smaller influencers. But if your goals are that Super Bowl impact of brand awareness to a very large audience in one shot.
Mhm.
And of course, also aligning yourself with a certain type of personality. You know, your Reese Witherspoon audience is going to be very different than perhaps your Kylie Jenner audience.
Mhm.
If you've got the budget to work with folks like this, it can have a big splash.
Mhm. And then social sensations and experts, we kind of combine them, but they are a little different. And so social sensations are essentially influencers that are not reliant on a blog or video content. They focus on platforms, so Instagram or Pinterest, and they are influencing their audiences through specifically those contents. And so that could be really great for niche markets. We put an example here, Marie Kondo, where she's definitely within the home storage organization. And so you'll find a lot of people, I think too, it's becoming harder for, and you can kind of maybe speak to this a little bit, for influencers to keep up with their blogs. And so
yeah, before all of the other social platforms became necessary to keep up with, I blogged 5 days a week, no excuses, for I think 7 or 8 years straight. I never missed a day. And now I average 2 blog posts a week. But of course, I'm also posting daily, not just to my main Instagram feed, but also, 12 to 15 times a day on Instagram stories.
Mhm.
And I'm creating video content, which is more labor intensive, and that takes away time from when I might be writing blog posts. So there are a lot of people I know who have even left blogs by the wayside and are focusing solely on Pinterest or Instagram or TikTok or whatever the next sensation is.
Right, exactly. But yeah, I think the point to that is, we've worked with companies where growing their social media is their #1 goal. And so working with a social sensation would probably be a better fit than maybe a blogger who kind of has the whole package. And then niche expert, I think, kind of goes hand in hand with working with influencers in specific categories. So like Anne mentioned, with home, but we can get even more specific. I mean, there are pet influencers, there are family and kid influencers.
Storage and organization, mixology and barware.
Yeah, I mean, I know super talented influencer who focuses just on table setting,
Yep.
and that's her focus.
Yep.
And so
meal prep, if you're a company that's in the container and food storage space, working with someone who talks about meal prep is a fantastic opportunity. Basically, there's an influencer out there for everyone, and probably 1,000 influencers out there for everyone.
Okay, so let's jump into some key stats, and really why we wanted to put this in here. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but there's a lot of, I feel like, not concerned, but just questions as to how valid is influencer marketing. Should I incorporate this? We know that there wasn't just an influencer budget that appeared. You're either creating it or you're taking it from something else that you are already doing. And so you are trying to find out how much money should I put behind it, but is it a valid marketing initiative that I should incorporate into my business? And so we are here to say definitely yes.
We're biased, but definitely yes.
But to give you some numbers behind that too, so the first stat we have here is companies received 11 times higher return on their investment when working with influencer marketing as opposed to other forms of digital media. I think too, talking about how many influencers or bloggers there actually are out there. There are 30 million bloggers in the US alone. And these are content creators that are getting paid and making a living off of this career. And so it's definitely a valid industry and a valid business. And many people are are taking that business and starting their own lines and, you know, going beyond the social component of it.
The audience demand is definitely there for this type of content and only growing.
Mm-hmm. And then another report from Influencer Marketing Hub was, you know, companies received 5 times more earned media value for every dollar that they spent on influencer marketing. And so earned media value is essentially the monetary value of publicity that you are receiving for every dollar spent on influencer marketing. So essentially over 5 times your ROI.
Yeah, so if you spend $1 on an influencer, you can expect to make $5.20 from that contract.
Mm-hmm. And I know Anne questions this last stat. She thinks it's actually a lot more.
Oh yeah, I definitely think it's more.
But it's important to know that influencers, or I'm sorry, people now more than ever are spending a lot of time on social media. I know it's the first thing, guilty, that I look at every morning. Many of you probably are on social or have kids or husbands and wives. People on average spend 1 hour and 15 minutes a day on social media platforms, on average. Okay, so going into some more fun stats that we wanted to present.
Yeah, so these numbers are helping us assess, all right, well, people are on social media, people are engaging with influencer content, but how much is it actually impacting their purchasing and marketing behaviors? 63% of millennials, which is that buying range of, what are the millennials now, 25 to 40, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's 25 to, well, it changes.
Yeah, it changes. But a good chunk of folks report trusting influencers more than a traditional brand advertising. And of course, we can see this incidentally. We can see the engagement, the number of likes and comments that a post from an influencer who has a personality and a consistent style on Instagram. They're getting way better engagement than if you go to, say, a company's website, and the numbers that you're seeing for likes and comments on their posts are much, much, much lower. It's quite observable in the platforms. And then 74% of the same consumers are reporting using advertising avoidance strategies. So that's everything from using ad blockers to paying a premium for a service like YouTube Red, where you don't have to see the ads. And that means that you might be spending money on a beautiful TV ad or a gorgeous banner ad, but no one is seeing it because audiences are becoming that much more suspicious of traditional advertising methods.
Mm-hmm.
And then 58% of millennials bought a product mentioned by an influencer. Certainly, I am a working influencer and I buy products recommended by my peers all the time because there's that trust, because I admire the way their life looks and the way they're living, and I want a piece of that too. And because they can tell those bigger stories of, here's why I love the product, here's how I use it, here's how I incorporate it into my daily life, that I'm just not going to get that depth of storytelling from a banner ad, a magazine print ad, etc.
Yeah, and I think also to note on that last stat is, you know, perhaps someone didn't instantly purchase that product from that 24-hour period that, you know, it's super hot and popular, but it's what we talked about before of driving those purchasing decisions, so that when they are at the store and they're presented with 2 different options, they remember that their favorite influencer had recommended this brand and they purchased that product.
Yeah, absolutely. And that especially goes for those higher ticket items. I'm not going to just click on a link and buy a couch, but there was an interior design project that I did. I think it went live 2.5, 3 years ago, and I still have people messaging me telling me that they just now bought the sofa that I used in that project 3 years ago because they saw it then, they've seen it consistently on Pinterest and other people purchasing that sofa. So it really is this waterfall or snowball effect where one mention can become so much more than that.
And I did look it up while we were chatting. And so the millennial demographic is they're born in the early 80s and ending in the early 2000s.
Okay.
So that's the age range.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. And I know that we actually have only 10 minutes left, and I know that we want to have enough time for questions. And I forgot to mention at the beginning that if you do have questions, please write it in the chat box so that we can answer those questions at the end of the presentation. And so what we'll do is try to skim through part of the next sections here. And so this slide here we just thought was really important to show, not only to show you how many users are actually on all of these different platforms, but you can see Facebook, 2.2 billion users, YouTube close behind them, 1.9 billion users. Facebook owns Instagram, and so they have 1 billion users. I'm sure there's a lot of crossover, but that still makes them the dominant player really in our industry. And then I think just focusing on Pinterest for home, because we know really Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook is where a lot of the content creators live. And so even though Pinterest only has 200 million users, Pinterest is actually a really great platform to use because it's essentially a search engine for
visuals.
Exactly. And with Pinterest, you're able to put actual direct links. And so Pinterest is actually really great in driving traffic and then converting for sales. But it definitely is the longer game. It's not as instant gratification. I mean, you'll probably see a pin from a year ago that is now performing really, really great. Where Instagram is definitely going to be more of that sort of instant kind of gratification, but so this slide here.
And then what this slide here really speaks to is thinking about what your goals and objectives are will influence which platform you may choose to play on with an influencer campaign. And this is that same idea of neither is better or worse than the other. They just meet different goals. So as Liza was saying, Pinterest is fantastic for driving traffic to specific links and turning impressions into sales. And it can really take place over a long time. Like a pin that was posted 3 years ago might only go viral now. So it's definitely more of a long game. And Instagram, of course, now there's posting on your Instagram main feed, there are stories, there's IGTV, and there's benefits to each. Instagram stories is the only one where you can put a direct swipe up link. So if you're looking to drive traffic and sales, that perhaps you engage an influencer to do a series of stories rather than a post on their main feed, etc.
I did want to mention one stat regarding Instagram and Facebook that I thought was really interesting. So 78% of social influencers for brand collaborations use Instagram as their primary platform for their campaigns, where the same study showed only 2% of influencers used Facebook as their platform. And so we're seeing a lot more collaborations on Instagram as opposed to Facebook, but Facebook obviously has its own benefits, having a slightly older demographic. I think they're great for video content, but also being able to do some targeted ads with perhaps some of the content that you've actually received from the influencers.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so really quickly we want to run through just some success stories with you. This was a campaign done, and we like to show it because there's puppies and babies. And we laughed about it at the chess presentation of how if you put puppies and babies, you'll definitely get a really great engagement. But you can see here, they worked with mega and macro influencers. And so bigger budgets, of course, because it's pedigree. But they were able to reach 43 million impressions. And so impressions is, how many times that post was actually seen. Out of those impressions, they received over 9,000 engagements. And so engagements are going to be people actually commenting, liking, sharing,
saving.
Exactly. So interacting with the actual post. So you can see the type of numbers and results that you can get on some of these larger campaigns. Similar with Bigelow Tea, it says team, but it should be tea. Their goal was actually different. The pedigree was, building brand awareness. This goal was to drive more organic traffic. And so they worked with bloggers. So you could see here an example of macro mommy bloggers. And they actually also received about 44 million impressions, which is great. Their engagements were incredible, but they also saw a sales lift on their end as well. And so again, like targeting your campaigns around what your goals are, we keep saying that, but that's so important, is what's going to get you the results that you want. So this was a campaign that we actually did, and this is an example of working with more of micro influencers. And so we, worked with Traditional Home Magazine and did showroom tours actually at the Mart. And so the goal was really to bring awareness to a lot of the different showrooms there. And you could see working with, this was a more design community, influencers between 10 and 25,000 followers. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, an influencer with 500,000 followers. You can make an impact in your niche industry with micro influencers. And so our impressions were over 300,000.
And you targeted for the Chicago area, is that correct?
Yes, exactly. And
so not just 300,000 across the world, but 300,000 in Chicago based on the influencers who were selected for their Chicago-based audience, which actually is like super impressive.
Okay, and we're running through these a little fast, but I want to make sure we have enough time for questions.
Yeah. So do you want me to run through these really quickly? And we can get into these more in part 2 if people feel like we didn't dive in enough.
I think
But
so.
This is what we've been saying, depending on your goals and objectives is going to impact the type of campaign that you do. So if you're looking to build brand awareness, you might be choosing to work with influencers who have a larger following, and you're going for reach over engagement. So total number of views over likes and comments.
Right.
If you're looking to drive traffic to a specific site, as we've mentioned, blog posts and then Pinterest and Instagram stories specifically, those are the platforms where you can be inserting actual trackable links. If you're looking to reach a target or new audience, you might focus on niche influencers. For example, we just showed you that Traditional Home campaign we did where it was specific to the Chicago design community. If you're looking to grow your own social following, which is absolutely a really important goal to have, you might focus solely on folks who are on Instagram and can be tagging you and linking to your handle. You might do giveaways where one of the entry parameters is that all entrants have to follow your handle. Giveaways are a great way to build your social following. And then creating content, that's another really important goal, because of course you need content for your social feeds and your website and your catalogs, and partnering with content creators is a great way to get that bang for your buck, where they're creating content that is being seen by their audience, but you're also collecting images that you yourself can then be repurposing. And you can really set the parameters for what you want the visuals to look like, so that you're getting content you too can use for your brand.
And saving you a ton of money.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, contracting an influencer $3,000 for 5 images on a blog post and access to their following is a lot more bang for your buck than paying $25,000 for a commercial shoot in a studio.
Okay.
Oh wow, look at that.
So we made it right at the end. I know.
Any burning questions?
We have quite a few, ladies.
Oh boy.
The first one is, how can a brand ensure their brand voice is represented correctly by the influencer?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we're going to get into in part 2 of the of our series of presentations here. But simply put, working either with someone like Embello or coming up yourself with a really clear brief, a creative brief that you send to the influencer that has all of your visual and messaging guidelines. It's all about that upfront communication to ensure that your messaging goals will be met, and then having checkpoints along the way. So we always recommend seeing a draft of the content for you to approve before it goes live.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of work before a post goes live that should be accounted for. And so like Anne mentioned, that creative brief that's going to have the messaging, visual guidelines, and being as specific as possible, whether you're looking for living room shots versus bathroom shots, or if you want bright lighting or colors or specific hashtags that you want incorporated.
Yeah.
All of this should be included in the campaign brief. And then like Anne mentioned, different 2 touch points in the process of having approvals of the concept of what the influencer plans to do, but then also the final post where they present the blog, the actual Instagram caption, so that they can ensure that, you know, the messaging, of course, you know, there's always a balance, I think, and letting the influencer communicate it in their own voice, because that's super, super important. It can't feel like an ad, essentially, but making sure that some of those key messaging touch points are met.
Yeah, and we are going to get very in-depth with best practices for putting those types of creative guidelines together. But the one thing I will add is we often get this question of, well, why should I be paying influencers? Why can't I just send them some product and let them post about it? Well, if you want that increased level of control over your messaging, then that's where paying for a contracted campaign really comes into play. But like we said, we're going to get way in depth. So bookmark your calendars for that TBD part 2 of this presentation.
Perfect. The next one, what platform would you suggest starting with?
So I think it goes back to, we keep talking about those goals and objectives, but you know, if your goal is to increase your social following on, you know, Instagram, obviously working with Instagram influencers, I think what we're seeing in the home industry specifically is Instagram and Facebook being Instagram and Pinterest being the 2 platforms where the content creators are creating their content. And that's the most activity that we are seeing in brand collaborations. And honestly, where visually, where you can, like Anne mentioned, you can create content, but also spread the message through their audience. So I would recommend starting with Instagram.
Yeah, I think Instagram is a great place to start. What I would add to that, however, is it is important that your own Instagram page be representative of the brand message you want to be sending. So if you're not proud of what your Instagram looks like, and you're working with influencers who are going to be tagging you, and their audiences are going to be coming to your Instagram page to check you out and see who you are, and you're not excited for them to see that page, that's actually your first starting point, is get your own social looking like something you're proud of.
Yeah, that's a great point.
All right, how can brands find the right influencers for them?
So we'll definitely touch on this in the next webinar as well. But like I mentioned, there are 30 million bloggers in the US alone. There are so many niche categories, so many opportunities. And of course, you can Google the top influencers, and you're going to get those mega influencers that are probably out of your budget that your competitor has worked with. And so what you want to find are those micro influencers that are able, that, people might not have necessarily found, but have those really dedicated audiences.
Yeah.
And so
I think also, you can certainly do it manually. You can get lost down that Instagram rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely an option. It's pretty time consuming. And here's where we'll put in a plug for Embello. We ourselves have a roster of how many influencers now?
10,000.
Yeah, 10,000 influencers and counting. And working with an agency such as Embello gives you access to our roster. We've already done all the homework. We've already vetted all those influencers to make sure that the content they're creating is top notch, and that whatever you end up paying in agency fees is more than worth it in terms of the time you save not having to dig around on Instagram hoping to find that undiscovered gem who's going to be great to work with.
You might also be getting inbound inquiries as well. And so being able to vet through, those influencers that could be a right fit, again, that's time consuming. But influencers do reach out to brands sometimes, so that could be a great start as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, that is all we have for now. And on behalf of IHA, I would like to thank Liza and Ann for a great webinar, Rules of Engagement Part 1. And thank you all for joining us, and stay tuned for the next webinar. We will be sending it out shortly for Liza and Ann's next webinar. Thank you all, and have a great day.